So the the dynamic that is being illuminated in the field this morning is to know our true nature, to live in the fullness, the wholeness of who we are. And we long for that because we are already that. Right? The only reason that we long for that is because we already are. And so there's a knowing that's already present. And yet we have this other sense that we're not whole, and that there's a longing for that wholeness. And in the longing for the wholeness, it's like it creates a kind of a longing, an ache, a devotion, a pointing towards, a seeking, a searching, right? All of the ways that we're trying to find out, how can I live this truth? How can I come to the wholeness? How can I come to love? How can I get free of the stress, the suffering, the sense of feeling incomplete, lacking, and deficient? And so there's like a really pure intention and a deep call of the heart. And it can be really sincere and committed. And yet what we also come to notice in the play of our human condition is that we can feel like we want only that, like I really want that. And yet then why do I seemingly behave and move in ways that almost like it's like we give with one hand and we take away with the other, right? I give everything to God and glory, to love, to this unfolding, to my own freedom, to my evolution. I give everything. And yet we notice, well, here's the place where I take back somehow. In Sanskrit, there's a word that's called prajnaparada, which translated means almost like a crime against the wisdom, that we make a move against the wisdom, even though the wisdom is present. And so we almost know, like, why do I do the things that are not supportive? It's almost like there can be a sense of like, I know what is true. I know what feels aligned. And yet, how come I move in these ways? And then when we recognize that we seem to be moving in ways that are going against the wisdom of the heart and seem to be not aligned or in accord, where we can then create like self-judgment and criticism and a sense of I'm doing something wrong because I'm moving against the wisdom. I'm moving against what I'm longing for. And there can be a deep questioning of like, why do I do that? Like, what is that? If I long for this glory and I can feel like what aligns and when I feel that truth, how come the movements happen that don't align? Like, what is that? Like, what's going on there? So of course, there we meet the unconscious that is constantly arriving, and we meet the patterning and the conditionings and the protections that have come in as survival mechanisms in this life, and that are moving from the subconscious, right? So the subconscious is kind of like the conditionings and the habits, we might say, and the unconscious is that which is really more repressed, that we don't even know. And it can seem kind of curious, strange, even alarming. Like, what is that? Where does that come from, right? So I'm really feeling the aliveness of this in the field this morning, to kind of explore this, to be curious with this, and to be curious with this from a place in this moment, as this expression is coming, calling forward the intelligence that illuminates that in truth we're never doing something wrong. So whether we're moving from like a seeming alignment with the wisdom and our longing, and we're being a good disciple of God, a good child of God, a good reverent sincere being, and we feel like we can confirm that in our experience. I feel aligned, I feel pure, I feel good. And don't, okay, now I don't feel so good. Like, why did I do that? Why did that happen? Or how could I do this better? Why is this happening? Why is this arising? Right? So what we know in the technology of love is that nothing is outside of love. Everything is included. And so what we're longing for and what we're moving towards is living at the frequency of the love that includes everything, that doesn't make anything that happens wrong. Because what we can see in that is it actually the behavior that is wrong or unconscious? Like, is there anything making the unconscious behavior or the patterns or the habits wrong except the mind that is judging, right? So then we can look at we could say the technology that says, no, there's nothing here making it wrong except for my mind. My mind's making it wrong. And why is my mind making it wrong? Why do I make this wrong? Well, often we make it wrong because I don't feel good and I want to feel good, right? And I know what it is to feel good and aligned and wholesome and in true nature. I know that that feels like freedom. And now I don't feel good. So now I'm making myself wrong because I must have done something that's making me not feel good. When what I long for is to feel good. So here we meet this subtle edge of, we could say, a difference between good and bad, and wanting the good over the seeming bad, wanting the pleasure over the pain. And here then we meet a place that says, okay, so what if I'm not looking at it from the mind's perspective of good and bad, right and wrong? What if I look upon it as the light that illuminates and the technology of love that only sees itself? And so I'm looking upon it from a place that doesn't put all of my behaviors and all of the kind of play of my life into a right and wrong category. What if I can just look upon it all with the same openness that doesn't make a judgment and doesn't make like an evaluation? What happens then, right? And then we could say, okay, yeah, but some of those behaviors actually, like, they don't really actually feel aligned. Like in the big, I can feel that some of those behaviors, some of those habits, some of those ways of moving, they don't actually feel aligned. I don't actually feel like I'm judging them, but I recognize that, like, that to really be aligned with the longing, it feels like letting go of some of those habits and some of those ways that I move would actually be really supportive of my longing. So then, how can I let go of the things that don't serve? And so what if I frame it that I'm never doing anything wrong, and yet it would be great if there was a way to somehow lovingly care for and support the parts of me that still move in these conditioned ways. What 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 would that be like? Right? So just as the words are coming, just feel how the words relate to your direct experience and just what you're noticing in connection with what we are bringing forward. So then what if the way that those patterns changing, that we recognize, well, I feel like it would be a kind of upgrade out of some sort of denser unconscious and subconscious habits and conditionings. I feel like it would be an upgrade for recalibrations to happen, for upgrades, for reorientations and repatternings of the field. I feel like that would be really supportive. So then we come to a place in our field where the energy starts to be open and not judgmental, not limiting, not unkind, but starts to look upon from a place that says, I see this, and I'm not judging, I'm not making it wrong, but I also recognize that a shifting here could feel really, really up-leveling and supportive. So how would the intelligence be with this? How would the intelligence be with the possibility of shifting and upgrading patterns and habits and conditionings that seem to keep us bound, seem to actually make us frustrated because we're done with all of that, aren't we? Quite frankly, we're done. Like, we're done. I'm done with that. And yet here it comes again. Like, what's that about, right? So what if it's just to be the intelligence, to be the resting intelligence, the light that looks upon and truly sees, is able to discern and recognize, invite recalibration, invite upgrading, invite clear seeing, and on a certain level isn't saying no in resistance or unkindness, but is saying enough, enough, right? And it's about finding this fine tuning where we actually find a frequency that isn't saying no, resistant, it's not unkind, it's not judgmental, but it's saying enough. And when it says enough, it's saying, I'm really ready to let go of this. I'm willing to see what I need to see, feel what I need to feel, and meet what I need to meet in order for the recalibrations and the upgrades to happen here. I'm upgrading my yes to God and glory. I'm upgrading my yes to the fullness of love. I'm upgrading my yes to wholeness. And I'm inviting that anything and everything in my field that doesn't support wholeness is called into the light of love and is recalibrated to support the truth of this heart, the sincerity of this heart. And so, again, as these words are coming, can you feel the intelligence and the frequency shifting of how seeing it this way that the intelligence is offering us right now is different at the level of frequency of making wrong and needing to fix and change? Because the need to fix and change is actually somehow a commitment to limitation that's really saying, I'm willing to judge myself and to keep feeling the misery and the stress around this, but I'm not actually willing to feel like what it feels like to break orbit when I really say yes to God and glory, right? And all of this is not to say that our yes to God and glory and to love isn't absolutely sincere. Of course, it's as sincere as we can possibly make it at a frequency level right now. But what we're inviting is that as we rest and we open to what feels in our field of experience to not be free, where we notice, well, this pattern keeps happening, and whether it's a habit or whether it's like a behavior, or whether it's a protective conditioning, whether it's something that we notice more by ourselves in our kind of conditioning and habits, or whether it's something we notice in relation to others. And it doesn't even matter really if we can pinpoint like what it comes from, what it's all about. I mean, any kind of illumination that comes naturally like that is really beautiful. But we also come to realize that it's not about processing it in the ways that we have, that we come to a point where processing is such a profound thing, and my goodness, it's given us a lot of insight. But we get to the point within the evolution of our consciousness where processing isn't necessarily going to carry us into the refined realms of subtle perception of consciousness, where the intelligence then takes over. We could say our sense of processing, which has always been intelligence, of course, but that sense of processing within the field of the mind and limitation shifts to the intelligence processing in the greater field of our consciousness, and recalibrating the nervous system, recalibrating the consciousness, and upgrading in ways that we don't actually really know what is happening. And we're not actually taking part on the level of processing, that in a way our part is to rest and to open with a frequency of willingness, courage, to look upon what feels to be discordant, to look upon the field, and to allow the intelligence to recalibrate. And this place that we're speaking of, where we recognize, I look upon the places where I'm not free. I look upon and I can see the behaviors, I can see, but I can't quite get to how to unhook it. And that's because we don't know how to unhook it. It has to kind of unhook itself. And it unhooks itself when we make ourselves ready, when there's a readiness in consciousness to unhook from something that has been a survival mechanism. It's been a support at some point in the life. And yes, we can have unconscious commitments to tribal consciousness. We can have unconscious commitments to the tribal consciousness of our families, so that we could say in the young life, we learned that the way that this family does things, like in our early life, we don't really know that it's discordant. So we say, well, this is love. And this is what I know of love. So to stay in connection and love and accord with my family tribal consciousness, then I have to stay. So there can be unconscious commitments in our field. And so then, as we're bringing attention to this right now, where the field of transmission is opening up to illuminate where there might be those kind of unconscious commitments, and shining upon. And it's not about working it out, although insight can certainly come. It's not about working it out. It's then about a willingness to say, my yes to God and glory, my yes to the wholeness of true love is so sincere in my heart right now that I am willing, in my devotion to my own wholeness, I'm willing to release the old unconscious patterns of commitment to the consciousness of my family, my mother, father, my caregivers. I'm willing to reorient the frequency of love to the out of the discordant frequency of love, and what I believed love to be, and where I believed nourishment was, and how that kept me safe, seemingly in my young life. I'm willing to release those patterns and reorient my field to true coherence with love, true love, the love of God. And I know that if I reorient the field and I let go of those patterns, all of the ones that I love also receive the grace of that reorientation, that I'm not letting anyone down, I'm not leaving, I'm not making myself unsafe, that true nourishment is still here, and I release what no longer serves. And I release it in a frequency field of true love, and in my devotion to my own wholeness. And that when I'm in devotion to my own wholeness, I'm in devotion to the wholeness for the whole. The wholeness in a holistic way for the whole collective, right? So there's this releasing on this level that starts to happen. And of course, where we still see that there are behaviors and protections and certain just ways of moving that are still playing, again, instead of making it wrong, instead of trying to fix and change, instead of trying to work it out, like, what do I need to do here? We invite, what am I not seeing here? And I am willing to see my commitment, my devotion to my own wholeness opens me up to a willingness to see what I haven't seen before, and a willingness for my field to be repatterned in love, to be repatterned in wholeness, to be repatterned and reoriented in truth. And then here I can feel the kindness that isn't making any of my behaviors wrong. It's not aligning with any kind of criticism or judgment. It's aligning with a frequency of love and intelligence that has the power to repattern the field. Now, one of the things that we can be very committed to is a sense of playing it small. Like, part of the tribal consciousness of belonging and fitting in is to play it small, to kind of fit in, to find your place and to fit in. And so not to maybe stand out, not to shine, not to make yourself too visible, right? And so what I've noticed is that when there's a tracing back of all of the patterns that play as discordance, that everything that's playing in the most subtle ways or the most obvious ways, everything seems to be connected to not being too visible, not shining too bright, not truly being in the full power. And so then we meet the sense of the dance of life, where we're longing to step into the fullness of our dharma, our purpose, the fullness, the grace and glory of being an emanation, being a dharmic flow, right? We're longing to be in this kind of flow. And yet it seems like the patterns are somehow keeping us apart from our fullness, keeping us away from. We could sometimes people speak of it as like almost like a bit of sabotage or holding back, or we can see the protection in it, right? The words don't matter. You can feel the frequency of what we're pointing to. And so, again, what is it to not be making wrong? What is it to embody a frequency of visible? What is it to embody a frequency of yes? To embody a frequency that says, I'm in devotion to my own wholeness. I am saying yes to God and glory. And that's it. Here I am, right? Here I am. And whatever needs to reorient in this life, let it reorient around my ginormous yes. Let it reorient around my heart that does feel truly committed. And that even if I move in ways that feel to be discordant or unconscious, or patterns are still playing, that every time I see something, I'm bringing it home. I'm bringing something that is unconscious, subconscious, something that is innocently protected, wherever it's been stuffed, right? However, whether it's stuffed down just below the surface or whether it's like really stuffed into the back corner, right? I'm willing to hold a space of love and care for everything. As it's ready, no need to excavate, no need to push. I know and trust that life will bring forward what I'm ready to hold a space for. And my devoted heart, my heart that says yes to the glory, to my own wholeness, to the fullest expression of wild possibility in this life. I'm willing to be visible. I'm willing to live at the frequency of visible. To see and be seen in the glory. To see and be seen. To be connected to my intuitive knowing of where my yes is, where my no is, and to know that whichever way that moves on the surface of life, it's always coming out of a yes to God and glory. It's always coming out of my deep intuitive yes to my own wholeness, right? And so at a frequency level, my frequency of visible is a frequency of yes, yes to all of life, right?